Wow, it's wonderful to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for coming. I am so honored to have been invited today to give this talk. And I'm a little bit, well, I'm not nervous, I'm very excited, in fact. I've given this talk many times in Swedish, but this is the first time in English. Unfortunately, it's not going to be in Danish. My Danish is terrible, and I didn't understand a word of what you said. But a few words I got, so that was really nice. So, my name is Ann-Charlotte, and I'm going to go into a bit about my story and all of this, but this will come later. The first thing that I'd like to do is for you to get to know each other a little bit. So, turn around and say hello to some new friends. Just say hi to each other. This is just as much about networking and getting to know each other. And now, I know this is the best part, but we have to continue. So find a partner quickly, a friend right next to you, and we're going to ask each other some questions, or just one question actually, which is really important. When you walk out through that door today, I would like all of you to go out there, and I want you to bring with you whatever you came here for, whatever you came here to receive. So why are you here? Ask each other this question really, really quickly. What do you expect from this? What do you want to get out from this afternoon that we have together? So please think about that. And the people on the right-hand side, you can start asking the person on the left-hand side. So just a minute for this. All right, now turn the other way, so ask the other person, and make sure that you listen. Okay. All right. I know you want to talk. So I'd like to hear one or two voices. Can I see a hand somewhere? Who would like to share why you're here today? Just, yeah, okay, down there in the white t-shirt. Okay, you will get that, for sure. Another one. Do we have one more? Yeah, down there? Okay, you have a baby, a small baby at home, and you want to make sure that the baby is healthy and happy for the rest of his or her life. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. What am I doing? Oh, Gaia TV is here and taking care of that whole part. Thank you so much for doing that. Wonderful. To vaccinate or not to vaccinate. I love Shakespeare. I just stood on the stage and performed Othello in Sweden, 10 performances of Othello. Shakespeare comes in all the time. Well, this is the question. So today we're going to cover a lot of information. So I hope you've filled up with coffee and all of these things so you stay awake, because it's a lot. Vaccine history. We're going to talk about different types of vaccines, the content, the adverse reactions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the HPV vaccine and cervix cancer, because that's my specialty. I spent 10 years working with these things. We're going to look at the differences between non-vaccinated and vaccinated populations, even though there is not a whole lot of studies done non-vaccinated groups, but there is some information. What is the difference between vaccination and immunization? Can you hear me okay, everybody? Yeah, good. And a little bit my story, and that's why I'm standing here today, for several reasons. And then a little bit about natural health, how we can, sometimes we get these scares from when we go to, in Sweden it's called Barnavårdscentralen. I don't know what it's called in Denmark, but you have this place where you go with your babies and you weigh them and you measure them and you give them shots. There is a lot of pressure to, and not so much information. So my big point here is really to share that you can be healthy and you can be, I'm going ahead of myself. I'm not going to say anything more now. So we're gonna spend about 10 minutes in the end with questions. If there is a question that something totally doesn't make sense to you, of course, raise your hand and say, what do you mean with that? But most of the things that you're thinking about, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to cover during this 90 minutes, so you will get a lot of answers. So it's better to save the questions for the end. Okay, so my name is Ann-Charlotte Stewart. I have a Bachelor of Science in microbiology from Uppsala University. I'm a doctor in medical genetics, also from Uppsala University, and my main study was papillomaviruses and cervical cancer. So I finished my dissertation in 1993, and I continued with a postdoc after I had finished my doctorate in Uppsala, and I went to the United States to do a postdoc there. And I continued in the same field, but instead of working with animal papillomaviruses that I did in Sweden, I started working with human papillomaviruses, which makes a lot of sense, of course. And I was at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Have you seen Breaking Bad? Anyone? That's my city. I'm so proud of that part of it. But 1995, I was pregnant. I was pregnant with my son, and I had a really hard time in the lab. In the US, the rules are very different from here in Europe. And even though I was pregnant and I was sick, my advisor just pushed me. You cannot stay at home. I got dizzy and I had a lot of problems. And she just got more and more angry at me for not producing results. So I couldn't stay, and that was a blessing. I had to get out in the world and do other things. So I had a spiritual awakening, and that goes very well with New Mexico, which is a very spiritual place. And my soul really called me to do other things. So I started studying healing, health, natural health, meditation, yoga, all of these things, basically to heal myself. Isn't this why we do things? Because we have a problem ourselves. So personal development, and I just felt I want to be enlightened. I want to understand what this means. And when you ask for big things, you get big challenges, for sure. So after about 10 years in the US, I moved away from there and lived and worked in India and Europe. I traveled between India and Europe and was just looking for answers and working and meeting people and helping myself. In 2009, I returned to Sweden, and since then, I've actually been stuck in Sweden, which is very strange for me, being a digital nomad, just traveling all over. Now it was even scary to take an airplane to Copenhagen, strangely enough. So I have worked with these questions ever since, and I'm still in Sweden. And I'm very proud of this last year. I've really worked with my own personal development and started studying opera singing, and I got to sing Othello 10 times. I'm super proud of that. Okay, so a little bit about my story. I have been sick since day one I came to this planet. I had food allergies from the very beginning, and why I had that, I don't know. But I also had allergies and asthma and all of these problems. And that's when you start looking for answers. And I went to the regular Western medicine to start with, and I didn't find any help there. They didn't help me at all. Rather the other way around. They gave me antibiotics, they gave me all kinds of medications, and I just got worse. I got sick. And then at 16, I was invited to travel to Thailand with some friends. And I took a lot of vaccines, a lot. And I was very proud of it in my yellow, you get the stamps. And I had all of them. And after that, my health just went downhill. And it got to the point where I lost all of my hair. 14 years ago, I lost everything. Eyebrows, eyelashes, all of my body hair. And the doctors, they told me, there's nothing you can do about this. Nothing. You're going to be hairless for the rest of your life. And I said, no way. No way. I want my hair back. It's very motivating to be a bald woman, you know. Is there anything worse? I don't know. It was bad. So I was motivated, and since then I've looked for answers. But this is impossible. This is not, what you see here is not possible, according to the doctors that I've talked to. But there are other ways. No, we stay with this. Let's continue. So now you have a little bit about my background. And what I see around me today is described very well by Dr. Tim O'Shea. His book, Vaccination is Not Immunization, is a very, very good book. It's filled with fact, but it's not for the weak-hearted, or, you know, it's heavy stuff, and you get sad very quickly when you read it. But he says, the declining health in our children becomes more and more apparent. Ritalin, insulin, antidepressive substances, and inhalants get more and more common. Is there anyone else who's noticed this? Despite the largest consumption of antibiotics and vaccines of all groups of children, our children are fatter, sicker, and more stupid than ever. I didn't say it, but... we have an epidemic of autoimmune and degenerative disease, and we have not had that before. People didn't used to die of these things back 100 years ago. We didn't have these things. We had other things that killed people, but not these things. Allergies, asthma, gluten, lactose intolerance. 10 years ago, I had never heard about gluten intolerance. Now everybody in Sweden is gluten intolerant, including my mother, who's never been sick with anything. Alopecia, which is what my hair loss is called, Guillain-Barré syndrome, diabetes type 1. Well, you get the picture. Lots and lots of strange degenerative and autoimmune disease, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer, autism. These are the big killers now. And it didn't used to be like this only 50 years ago. Sterility and infertility. How many people know somebody who's had to get help to become pregnant? And this is becoming more, yeah, lots of people. This is becoming more and more common. Why is this? Why is it like this? Well, here, this could be an explanation. The cost for a vaccine per child and year in 1975 was only $10. Maybe the vaccines were cheaper, but we didn't have, they didn't give a lot of vaccines back then. Maybe 2 or 3. In 2001, it was $385. 2004, $606. And 2011, over $1,200 per child, and getting all of the vaccines. So you see the trend here. There's money in this. But if we step one step further back, a little bit further back, very quickly about what's been going on with vaccines. It's a horrific story when you start reading about these things. In the 1870s, England had its worst outbreak of smallpox ever. 45,000 people died, 98% vaccine coverage. Back in those times, it was not voluntary to get vaccines. They would force people to get vaccines. So that's why you get these numbers. The same or a similar thing happened in Germany. 96% coverage, 125,000 people died of smallpox. Where did the smallpox come from? From the vaccine? I don't know. Germany, 1940, a mandatory, again, you have to get vaccination against diphtheria. And the cases in diphtheria increased from 40,000 to we have missed the zero there, 250,000. And it's an increase of 625% in 5 years. So vaccines work, but maybe not the way you would have hoped that they work. We step forward a bit in history. Jimmy Carter, he was the president in the United States from 77 to 81, and he increased the distribution of money to vaccines from $7 million to $47 million. So a lot of money came in there. And because of this, there was a drastic increase of adverse reactions, injuries and deaths. And of course, back in those days, the vaccine companies were responsible for what they produced. So this increased the cost for damages. People got injured. We have learned already that vaccines can cause problems. So it did cause a lot of problems. And the price went up for the vaccines, and this was not good at all for the companies that made money off of this. So what happened was that 16 out of 17 vaccine manufacturers pulled out because it wasn't, yeah, they couldn't make any profit off of it. So of course, there's no business. So what happens? The vaccine availability is not secure anymore. So the American, this is a big shift that happens here. The American government goes in and they say that they have immunity. The manufacturers have immunity. So they are no longer responsible for the damages. It's now instead the American government. And it is like this in Sweden, in all countries. The vaccine manufacturers are not responsible for what they do, what injuries they cause, because that has been handed over to our governments. So now it's the government that's responsible if you get injured from a vaccine, which of course gives these manufacturers a lot of freedom to do whatever they want. And the last thing now, I just heard a few days ago about Ebola, they are gonna use totally untested vaccines. And you scare people enough, they will go and get these things. And I'm sure that this Ebola, whatever, is going to be even worse than some of the other ones that we've had before. So in any case, the government, they needed a register of adverse reactions, so they were going to be able to pay the right money to the right people. So we have to know, what do vaccines actually do? So in '86, there was this comprehensive investigation from the American government to chart in detail all of these adverse effects from vaccines, which is really nice that they did. So this is the list from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia in USA, the American government. This is what they say, the adverse effects that we get from vaccines. The first one, acute encephalitis, brain inflammation, can be very dangerous. Chronic malfunction of the nervous system, problems with learning and motor skills, behavioral disturbances, problems with self-care, sensory disturbances, and all of these can be deadly. If we think about, of course I only know the situation in Sweden now, but I talk to teachers in school, and they say something has happened with our children. What is going on with them? Problems with learning is not uncommon today among our population. So, and again, this is what the CDC say. Anaphylactic shock, extensive allergic reaction, fever cramps, high-pitched cry. When you get a brain inflammation, a small child had the fontanelles are still open up at the head. And when you get this, well, some children, and I've had people in my audience who've told me about this, so I know that it happens. But when the fontanelle is open and you get inflammation of the brain swells so much that it actually starts bulging out through the fontanelle. And when they get this, they cry, a high-pitched cry that is really, really horrible to hear. You know, it sounds like it's very painful for these children who have this. Brachial neuritis, it's an inflammation of the nerves in the arms. Guillain-Barré syndrome, extensive inflammation of the nerves and can cause paralysis, which has happened also several times. It was a big case of swine flu in mass vaccination in the US in 1975. Thousands of people had this problem back then. Acute and chronic arthritis. Arthritis is also very common all over the place. And the list continues. Thrombocytopenia, when you get bruises very easily. And I've also heard people in my audience who've had their babies had thrombocytopenia, I can't even pronounce this. So they get very easily bruised. Measles, a typical measles is 15% mortality, and apparently it goes from the outside of the body inwards instead of the normal measles, which goes from inside and out. Death from measles, polio, and death from polio. Higher, sorry, thank you. An example, if we look at you have probably looked at product resumes. Is there anyone in here? We have a question there. Yeah. This is what the CDC says. So, and yes, you do. Some vaccines have live viruses, so you can get sick from the vaccine. I actually got a thing of smallpox when I got smallpox vaccination. I was really sick after that. And you're contagious too. You can spread it to other people. So yeah. Product resumes. Yeah. Where is the good? It's right there. Yeah, that's good. Product resumes. This is what you want to read before you take a vaccine. And if you're interested in vaccines and knowing what they contain, go directly to the company. This is from Merck, I think. But in any case, don't go to SSI, Statens Serum Institute, or in Sweden it's FAS, where you read about these things, but they omit a lot of information. So go directly to the company and look for the vaccine of interest and read for yourself. It's going to be a long read because it's usually 30, 40 pages, but you want to read that before you vaccinate yourself or anybody that you love. So this is a very interesting vaccine. It's called Cervarix. It's for hepatitis B, and it's given to American children before they are 24 hours old, the first day. And as you know, probably, hepatitis B is sexually transmitted, and it's also transmitted with injection needles if you use drugs. And I don't think there's a big danger for a small baby to contract this disease. So why give hepatitis B vaccine to these infants? It's a crime, I would say. Especially if you look at the list of adverse reactions. And you should have the list in your handouts. So I'm not even going to go through this because I get so depressed when I read about these things. So I leave that to you. But there's a long list of adverse reactions here. Okay, that was that. Stop. Stop. Take a deep breath. I do this just as much for myself because I get so... the first time I talked about these things, I get so upset. So it's good to take a deep breath every now and then and think. Okay, this is the general Swedish vaccination program. We introduced diphtheria vaccine in 1944. And then we continue with tetanus, whooping cough, polio, measles, rubella, HIV, pneumococci, mumps, and now the latest one is HPV. There are 3 more on the way onto this schedule. Rotavirus, Cervarix, hepatitis B is getting on the list very soon if the drug companies get the way they want, but I've listened to their discussion, so I know it's going to be there soon. And